Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you back to Kagekaze's domain. Here I'm getting ready to try and level up here to level 10. Since I was so close, I decided to go ahead and start over from the beginning, just to kind of maximize my potential for farming monsters here. I don't give a lot in the very beginning, but I end up having to go through the game a few times. Usually 2 or 3 times if I do the complete game, we'll do it. What I've done before is I've kind of started the quests up at Leroic, and with the new quest selection system I can actually start the game at a point where I can basically use Catacombs level 3 or Royal Crypts and just go in from there. And you know, that's great and all, but it's very short. You know, you go in, you do the 4 pillars event where the skeletons are spawning, and then you kill the king, and okay. I usually do that, and I usually kill the crypts where you try to find the crown, looking usually for the Jar of Souls event, because that one usually yields quite a bit of experience just from doing it, and from the potential of getting a lot of kills. So at this point I'll kind of show you what I've got on me right now. I've kind of got, I'm using a shield and mace with experience gear. I've got some boots, pants, a belt obviously, and the helm. So it's not a lot. Look at my details. About 21 bonus experience per kill all told. So in the beginning part here, that's going to probably equate to about 1 extra zombie kill per kill.
What can I? Thanks.
We're attacking the barricades.
And then this part, of course, will be the quick part, because obviously this will be level 10. This will be the passes. We'll just do a quick talk about it, and then I'll just move on, of course. Apparently, also, I didn't notice I had picked up this Vampiric Wand of Wounding last time. Actually, more DPS than the staff. Less overall damage, though. So it's kind of a trade-off. And I'll kind of talk about that later, I think more when I get Spectral Blade, because there's a couple things I want to talk about when I get Spectral Blades.
These little quill fiends can't be far from their nest. Nest won't spawn any more of those vermin.
Silly quill fiends. They destroyed their own nest. I didn't hit it. I want that to be known. I will not be sued for property damages.
The rumors of torture and worse grow every day. What has happened to Tristram and its king? I once thought Leroic a great man, but it seems I was deceived. We all were. He sends our meager army against West March on the morrow. What will become of us?
I don't think I've actually heard that one before. Now, what's interesting is I recently, there's a post on Diablo fans for old videos. It was actually kind of nice to go back and look at the old footage that they've showed at Blizzcon. Apparently, the rest of Act 1 is actually going to be a nice insight as to what happened to Tristram and what happened with Leroic. Because I saw a cutscene that deals with Leroic and his wife, as shown in the form of kind of ghosts. Whether or not that's still in, I don't know, but it was kind of creepy, and was definitely some insight as to what happened there, as showing how deeply Lazarus had basically taken control of the king, making him believe that there were issues there that really weren't.
I returned to Honduras after 20 years. The burden of countless failures and tragedies heaped upon my shoulders. Am I being punished for helping that stranger hunt the Dark Wanderer? I always thought Deckard Cain half a madman. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps he can banish the shadow hanging over my life.
Well, I honestly thought this level was going to come a little sooner than it is. Even though there aren't a lot of monsters here, the extra experience I thought would make up for it. So, There it is.
At least for now.
I was getting a little worried there for a moment. Passive skill slot, 2 passives. Power hungry. Ooh, tell me what it is. What is it? What's next? Blur. Well, that's new, I think. I think so. Yeah, glass cannon used to be given earlier, which increases all damage by 15% and reduces armor and resistances. Kind of a shame. I like that. That was just raw damage. Alright, well, let's take a look at what I've got now. Blur decreases melee damage taken by 20%, which, would have been great against, say, Leroic, but I apparently did a decent job without it. And Power Hungry gains 30 arcane power whenever you're healed by a health globe. Both useful, both more, well, Power Hungry is more offensive, really, because if I'm not hurt, I could still go to health globes and get more power back. Blur is just a flat-out defensive 20% defense. Now, keep in mind that's only melee, so archers and casters will still do a decent amount. Well, because I've been doing okay, and honestly didn't really have that hard of a time against Leoric, I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Power Hungry just to kind of keep things going, keep things moving smoothly. Alright, so honestly, there's really nothing to show with these. Some passives, sometimes I can show something else, sometimes I can't. These are just just honestly subtle. They work in the background. They're not something like the Demon Hunter where I get a shot that immobilizes every couple of seconds. Honestly, they're all passives, you think about it. There's really not anything to show, but sometimes they will change up gameplay in such a way that these passives can change the way you're playing your build. Just some of these, like cooldown reduction. That's would change your build practically, and how often you use certain skills. So some passives will change the way you play and can be more noticeable than others. Some, of course, will just be benefits, flat bonuses that you can use. So, alright, there's nothing really to talk about here, so I'm going to cut off and move on to the next segment. Alright, I'm not quite up to level yet, but I did manage to get Den of the Fallen. And what I wanted to show you guys is something that's been talked about a little bit. I might have talked about how rings and amulets don't drop in the game anymore, but certain monsters actually can. So basically they said in the patch notes, rings and amulets don't drop. Truth is, people are still finding rings. And they're found in very specific spots, the same spots that you would find amulets before. The skeletons just before the Skeleton King, the returns, are a very high monster level compared to everything else in the beta. And what we found out is that Den of the Fallen level 2 has roughly the same monster level. So apparently you can actually find items in there that you normally wouldn't, such as rings. The other thing you find is monsters with unique properties that we haven't seen before. And these are monsters that you could only see if you watched all that footage from Beyond the Gate that I pointed out in Diablo fans. Well, I wanted to hit record because I actually did run into one of these monster types, and I'm going to kind of show them off a little bit. I've ran into the Vortex. It's a plague carrier, which I believe only exists here in Den of the Fallen level 2, but I'm going to go ahead and run away from him, and you'll kind of see what he does. See, he does kind of a reverse teleport. He pulls you to him, so you keep staying away from him, and eventually he's going to try and get you to come to him. So this is one of those things that can be very nasty when combined with other abilities. Imagine something like a Vortex Waller, possibly with molten properties or something like that. You can see where him pulling you in could be very nasty, especially when combined with other skills and effects. Oh, see there? Kind of pulled me in when I didn't want to be close to him. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show off here, is that there are some monsters with a higher monster level in the beta still, but in very specific spots. The Returns and Den of the Fallen 2. This is why Den of the Fallen 2 is one of my favorite locations to find. Not only is it a fairly deep dungeon, fairly long, it's only 2 levels, so I can't say deep, but a fairly long dungeon, but it also offers these opportunities. Oh, there's still more apparently. Ooh, hello. So apparently the entire group has Vortex. That's nasty. So every single one of them had a chance to cast that. A balanced oak wand, huh? 12.8 on a natural wand. It's not bad, considering that's got 1 to 2. As a matter of fact, it's a white item that sells for 5 gold. Most white items don't sell that high. Like, let me take a look at this. Thick charge. Yeah, that's 5. I just haven't been picking up a lot of whites, apparently. Mostly I see them sell somewhere between 1 to 3. Anyway, I thought that would be something interesting to kind of show off. I'm still a little bit away from getting my level, as you can see. I've gotten about 50%, so... Alright, I will keep going. Alright, well, as you saw there, I hit the next level. Kind of wasn't expecting it from the quest turn-in that I did. Let's pull it up here. We got Spectral Blade for the primary skills and Arcane Orb's first rune. Alright, so let's look first at Spectral Blade. Summon a Spectral Blade that strikes all enemies in your path for 135% weapon damage. This has changed, and changed in a very good way. This weapon, or this ability, used to do only about 110, 105%, much like the other, basically just like all the other abilities that you got as a primary, really. It's been massively increased to be one of the best damaging abilities right now, or as a primary, actually the best, if I look here, yeah, the best damaging ability. And I like it because this ability is very short range and really should have the power to match its offset. I'm going to go ahead and put that on here. Oh, new passive? No, it was flashing new, but nothing new here. Okay. Okay, so I like that fact that it does 135% weapon damage now instead of the 110 or whatever, because honestly, since it did the same damage as the other abilities, it didn't seem to have a point. When you look at Magic Missile, which automatically did 105, 110, why would I pick an ability that's close range over an ability that's long range? Now, granted, you could say, well, Spectral Blade has, you know, different runes that'll make it act differently. That is true. But unruned, the ability was very lackluster. The best thing it had going for it was the fact that it hits 3 times. So that damage you see, 135, is actually split across 3 different hits. Alright? So that is one nice thing about it, which means every single one of these hits has a chance to crit. So unfortunately, you won't get a massive crit boost. You know, when you crit, you're not going to do a massive amount of damage, but you have a chance of each individual one doing a crit. So we move on now to Arcane Orb and Obliteration, and this is kind of nice to see. It increases the damage of the explosion to deal 228% weapon damage as Arcane. So just a pure buff to the damage. This has shifted around a bit. Arcane Nova is what we got before, which was honestly one of my favorites. Arcane Nova increases the range of the ability out to 20 yards. That's massive, really, when you think about it. I kind of showed a comparison where it could be about the size of one of the small islands where there, or I call it an island, but a small patch where there's tree and moss growing underneath the tree. So it was very big. I like that, but this just pure out damages it. 228, so you look at that. That makes Arcane Orb do more damage than Ray of Frost. So that makes this, let's just go put it on there. That's an incredible boost, really. I'll just go in here so I can take a look. 228 28 compared to 215. That's just amazing. Of course, keep in mind, 15 to 28 is not a huge damage buff. Especially when you consider the arcane power cost. That's something you really have to look at here. So whereas, you know, this is doing the 215 over 20, and not only that, but it's ticking at a constant rate. You're looking at about 10 damage, you know, a little over 10, not quite 11 damage per arcane power, as opposed to this arcane orb with Obliterate, 228 over the 35, and that'll give you about 6.5 damage per arcane power. So this is almost half as efficient. I will blow through... Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, I will end up blowing through my arcane power rather quickly because of that. Let me go to town so I can slot things around and talk about them while we're doing this without suffering from cooldowns. There we go. So Arcane Orb with Obliteration and Spectral Blade here. Okay. Very, very good. Okay, so talking about Spectral Blade again, each of these cuts is going to do basically about 45% weapon damage. Each one, again, having its own potential to crit. And what's good about that is that if you've got a build based on crits, because some of these passives can give you something if you crit. I don't really know any of them off the top of my head here. Critical hits have a chance to reduce the cooldown of your spells by 1 second. There you go. So something like Critical Mass. If you make a fairly high crit build and you use an ability like Spectral Blade, each one of those attacks is going to have your crit chance. So you're actually increasing your chance to crit in that one spell. Just cast it once and then there you go. It's kind of like Splinters for the Witch Doctor. Each one of those will have its own individual chance to crit. So if you're fishing for procs, an ability like Spectral Blade is going to be great. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put Diamond Skin back on. So I now have kind of a more interesting build. Don't have my Ray of Frost at a distance. You know what? I don't know if I want a Diamond Skin or Frost Nova. Quite honestly, either one of these would work pretty well with this build that I've got here. Because you think about it, I'm kind of basically making a build around Spectral Blade and Obliteration. Wave of Force works in almost any regards. Diamond Skin isn't bad. Wave of Force's downside is, of course, it does cost arcane power, even with a cooldown on it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and just gather my quest here, and I'm going to go back and we're going to farm the last crypt because I didn't get the event. And we'll use this build on the event and see how it feels. So here, as you can see, each strike attacks 3 times. Now there is something else I'm going to want to talk about, and I'm going to go ahead and I think I'll start that now so that I don't take up too much time doing this. But what I want to point out is Spectral Blade doesn't list a damage type. Summon a Spectral Blade that strikes all enemies in your path for 135% weapon damage. There is not an elemental type attributed to this skill, which is quite different to, say, here, Arcane Orb, which does arcane damage, Wave of Force, which does physical. So what I will do here, just to kind of prove a point, I'm going to put, Ray of Frost here. So I have Arcane, Physical, Cold, and Non-Elemental. Now, Non-Elemental is not a specific type. Don't take my calling it that as saying, oh, okay, that's a whole new damage type. No. Non-Elemental means that, as a default, this ability will do physical damage. This is doing physical right now, because it's based purely on my weapon. Oh, Nightmare. Let's kill a group. Back off a bit. And what's beautiful about Spectral Blade is, as you can see here, it's short range, but it can hit in a group. I can't really tell you exactly what the range is. It seems decent. I mean, you look at it, I'm not hitting them, obviously, but Get these guys together. I just hit both of them. So there's a pretty good range to it. So it's not just single target. Obviously, though, very close range. But this is all based off of my weapon. Right now I have a weapon that has really no, attribute to it. Well, I still have my crossbow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this down here and this down here. And I'm going to take my crossbow, and this does fire damage. And I'm going to show you something kind of interesting here. Like, take these imps here. I'm going to go ahead and hit them with that. Yeah, they're dying too quickly. Let's hit this guy. Oh, I like the color of that. That's pretty cool. Alright, and then if I use Ray of Frost, look at that. Even on these guys, it is cold. Purely cold. If I use Wave of Force, that is purely physical. Now, Spectral Blade, if he dies, this should be fire. See, look at this. See how they're burning? They're burning when I hit them? This is what I wanted to bring up. Spectral Blade, because it does not have an associated damage type, will inherit the damage type of your weapon. You may have heard me talk about Wave of Force when I picked it up the first time, how it didn't benefit from the elemental damage of my crossbow. I believe I wasn't very clear in stating this. What I meant to really describe here is that Wave of Force will not benefit from the fire damage, but it does still benefit from the plus to damage. In this case, this crossbow, you notice how it says 11 to 13 damage. That 11 to 13 is including the plus 2 to 3, like I talked about with the other weapons. For example, this wand, it says 8 to 13. That's compensating for the plus 1 to 2. The wand itself is actually a 7 to 11. So in this case, the damage is already baked into the weapon. The fire damage basically is just telling you it's going to do damage of a fire type. So when you have a skill like Wave of Force, it says as physical. Skills Ray of Frost, it says as cold, as arcane. This is basically to facilitate for builds that require specific damage type. For example, there's a passive that lets you do a little more damage for things that are frozen. Therefore, you want skills that say as cold. There will be skills that say you can slow monsters when you hit them with arcane. So you'll want skills that say as arcane. This is done basically to make it so that the skills that you use maintain their primary attributes and allow you to base your builds around them without worrying about if your weapon is going to override your damage type. Spectral Blade, since it does not specify a damage type, is probably one of the few, if not the only, skill that the wizard has that allows you to use a elemental type on your weapon. I just wanted to try and clear that up, and hopefully that this description I've given makes that a little easier to follow. So keep in mind, you still do get the plus to damage, but you just don't get the actual the element itself. The element is converted into the damage type of your skill. Alright, so that being said, I'm going to go ahead and do the Bones event, and then once I'm done here, we'll move on to the next. Of course, I should have gotten rid of Ray of Frost while I was thinking of it.
Need more arcane power.
See, I can actually see this working in a close-range ability build like I had before. Spectral Blade with Ray of Frost in the Sleet Storm skill. Get in close and use it. That, I think, wouldn't be too bad. I would honestly think I should pick the passive that we call Blur, which reduces the melee damage I take. Since I'm using Spectral Blades, this requires me to get into close range a lot more often. I like Obliterate. That is a massive amount of damage. But as you can see, it's a real resource hog. I cast 3 of it and I'm done. Whereas Ray of Frost can cast for a very long time. Alright, well there you have it. That's Spectral Blade, and that's Obliterate. Kind of notice a red hue to it, as opposed to the purplish hue that the Nova had.
They can rest again.